A game like World of Warcraft needs no introduction. It will be 12 years old this November. It's really hard to believe that much time has passed since we first stepped foot in the world of Azeroth. In a game this massive, it's going to have a lot of secrets, as well as a very interesting development process, one that certainly did not come easily for the folks over there at Blizzard Entertainment. So sit back and relax as I try to uncover some of the coolest secrets about World of Warcraft, from its development cycle to strange rumors, items, NPCs, and hints about legendary weapons being in the game, to just anything about the world in general that is just particularly interesting. I count down the coolest secrets to World of Warcraft that I could get my hands on. Enjoy. As with most things, it is best to start from the beginning. Now, the development cycle for World of Warcraft is honestly really interesting, and there's a lot more to the history of WoW than anyone could ever expect. While it's not specifically known just when WoW officially began development, the earliest signs of WoW can be traced all the way back to 1999 with a game known as Nomad. Now, Nomad didn't exactly get very far in its development cycle, and not too much is known about it. All we know about Nomad is what was said by Blizzard developers in the World of Warcraft Looking for Group documentary, which documents World of Warcraft's development as well as its rise to fame. All that was explained about Nomad by the devs was that it was their project before World of Warcraft even began. During the late 90s, Blizzard was heavily engaged in playing MMOs like Ultima Online and EverQuest. This comes as no surprise, as most people do know that Ultima Online, and more specifically EverQuest, worked as huge inspiration in World of Warcraft's development. Like I said earlier, it's very hard to determine the exact point where World of Warcraft was officially kicked off and where Nomad officially ended. But given that Ultima Online was released in 1997 and EverQuest 2 years later in 1999, it's not exactly a stretch to imagine that Nomad began development in the same year. Also, considering the fact that Nomad lasted no more than a couple months in development, it isn't exactly that much of a stretch either to assume that World of Warcraft started its official development around late 1999. Take a look at this screenshot. This is the earliest known screenshot to ever exist of World of Warcraft, and technically Warcraft 3. As this screenshot shows Warcraft 3 being developed in the Warcraft 3 engine. It is certainly humble beginnings, to say the least. There's another screenshot that also confirms that World of Warcraft's development was at least as early as 1999. This screenshot here is highlighted at Blizzard's own headquarters on their wall about the history of World of Warcraft itself. The screenshot itself is pretty self-explanatory. It is an early look at a human warrior, or at least what I assume to be a human warrior. His name is Malborn, and you can see a general look and UI of his spells and abilities, as well as the game menu icon, the spellbook, the character screen, and his bags. And needless to say, World of Warcraft certainly changed a lot from this point at 1999. These past two screenshots are the earliest known screenshots of World of Warcraft's development, but this one in particular seems that much more relevant since it at least kind of looks similar to the way World of Warcraft ended up looking. Now, this screenshot here doesn't exactly have an official date to it, but it was probably a couple months after that 1999 screenshot, so maybe in early 2000 or so. And this screenshot is really where we start to see the development of what would eventually become Vanilla WoW start to blossom. The difference between this screenshot and the last is that the previous screenshot is a complete relic, meaning that none of its assets are even anywhere near World of Warcraft's code or the initial retail code of Vanilla WoW. Whereas this screenshot here seems to be an early look at Westfall, and the tree stump and the general look of the trees as well as the ground, and even more so the character in this one, are much more reminiscent of what would be retail World of Warcraft. The UI is certainly around the same as the earlier screenshot from 1999, so the UI was definitely still very much in development at this time. This screenshot here is also a bit of a relic. Some of it, like the building in the background, doesn't really seem to exist anywhere in World of Warcraft's code, but looking at the ground texture and some of the trees in the background, it certainly seems to be pretty similar to what you would see in a zone like Elwyn Forest, for example. This screenshot is also particularly interesting as the main focal point is the early models for some of the races, like the orcs, the undead, the night elves, the dwarves, and the male human. I gotta say, those undead are pretty fucking ugly. Definitely glad they decided to move away from the anorexic zombie look. It should be noted that these screenshots were not made readily available to the public during this time. These are pretty much nothing more than just archived photos of World of Warcraft's early development, so these were by no means leaked to the internet back then, or at least as far as I'm aware of. The official reveal to the public of World of Warcraft was not done until September 2nd, 2001 at London's European Computer Trade Show. By watching the trailer, you can see just how far Blizzard came in around, I'd say, 2 years of development working on World of Warcraft since that very first screenshot within the Warcraft 3 engine. While the game's UI is very different from what launched with retail vanilla, the overall look and feel of the game is not too far off from its release 3 years late. Obviously, they only had so much to show in this initial trailer, but at least the general look and feel of World of Warcraft was starting to take form. From there, we do a nice time hop to the fateful day of November 23rd, 2004, where World of Warcraft made its epic debut in North America, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as an international release in South Korea and many parts of Europe in early 2005. That covers everything from the development of World of Warcraft, but now we get into the really fun stuff. One would figure, given all the trials and tribulations that Blizzard went through developing World of Warcraft and even getting it out the door on time, it would be completely smooth sailing from there, right? That definitely couldn't be farther from the truth. Blizzard had no idea how popular World of Warcraft would become in such a short amount of time. Blizzard originally planned for 1 million users on World of Warcraft by the end of 2005. What ended up happening was they had 1 million users within the first 4 months of release. This made the world server as a whole very unstable, resulting in frequent server crashes and long queue times to log in. I'm sure many of you know, if you played back then like I did, sometimes you would have to wait hours to even be able to log in, and who knows what time of day or night it was by the time that even happened. Blizzard was forced to launch all of their backup servers that they had planned to release in increments all at once due to the huge influx of players suddenly overcoming World of Warcraft. It really was a constant stream of problems for Blizzard. Wouldn't exactly say they would complain that their game exploded so quickly, but it certainly caught them off guard, especially considering that the development team and many of the folks over at Blizzard were exhausted from the development process of World of Warcraft itself. Hell, the raid Molten Core had to be finished a week before the game's launch. It was planned to be scrapped entirely, meaning that the only raid that would ship with retail vanilla WoW would be Onyxia's Lair. Up until the very end, they were doing everything they possibly could to make sure that World of Warcraft was as epic and full of content as possible. But honestly, as many old school vanilla players know that it started from day one, even once vanilla WoW was released, it was not even close to being fully finished. As much time as Blizzard spent developing the zones, quests, and everything to ensure that the game has as much content as possible, it really didn't pan out that way at all. For example, the zone of Silithus in southern Kalimdor didn't even have a single quest in it when vanilla WoW launched. And Silithus wasn't the only zone that wasn't finished. It seemed like the first half of leveling in vanilla WoW was what it should be. From there, past level 30, it seemed to be a complete mess. You could say even past your starting zone, it was a complete mess. It's the exact opposite of today, where you can outlevel a zone by doing 1/3 of the quests. Back then, you could do every single quest in a zone and only get about 2 to 3 levels. This wouldn't be that much of a problem if some of the zones weren't slated to be around 8 levels long. This left a huge gap in experience and level between zones, forcing players to murderously grind out mobs just to get their level back up to where it should be. However, a lot of things were more cryptic in vanilla WoW. There were lots of side quests that you had to go way out of your way to find, and things like that that really made it feel like a huge world to explore and a real adventure. As big a mess as vanilla WoW was, That was a big part of the appeal. The fact that you had to walk to instances and clear the mobs before you went in the instance, it made you feel like you were really on your way to clear some badass dungeon and save the day. And this is important to remember, considering the fact that Vanilla WoW was such a mess. Why it was so successful in the first place is because it was honestly pretty realistic. If you were in that situation, it wouldn't be easy. It would be very grindy, very difficult, but that was the appeal. Was it felt like a world, it was immersive, and it was kick-ass. Now there are some really interesting secrets and just other things that people may forget about the early days of WoW that are really fascinating. A lot of people have complained about the multiple legendary system in World of Warcraft Legion, but did you know that that actually has ties all the way back to Vanilla WoW? Blizzard originally intended for players to be able to obtain multiple legendary items, including weapons, neck pieces, and other things. However, by the release of the game, Blizzard decided that this maybe wasn't the best system to implement. By the time of the game's release, there was only 2 legendary items that were meant to be obtainable to players. The first one being Sulphurus, the Hand of Ragnaros, and the second being Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. Now there's a very important reason why I say they are the only 2 meant to be obtained by players. See, prior to patch 1.4, the rating system in Molten Core was very broken. Players could obtain both tier 1 and tier 2 sets from Molten Core and some pieces from Nyxia's Lair. These tier 2 sets in early WoW were very ugly, very bland, very generic looking compared to what the actual tier 2 ended up looking like. It almost seemed like Blizzard wasn't too sure of themselves, and they were almost like placeholder armor sets back then. The reason why I mention this system is, like I said, it was very broken at the time, and an item managed to slip by into the loot table that was never meant to be obtainable to players. This item was known as the Talisman of Binding Shard, and it was a legendary quality neck piece. There was only one person that ever looted it from Molten Core, and his name was Oxtane of the Nerfed Guild. As soon as Blizzard found out that Oxtane had obtained the talisman, they actually let him keep it. I guess they were feeling generous. However, they immediately hotfixed it out of the game after Oxtane looted it, meaning the Talisman of Binding Shard has to be one of the rarest items ever, if not the rarest, to ever exist in World of Warcraft. To this day, it's not really that clear why it was hotfixed out of the game, but I guess it's simply the fact that A, Blizzard didn't want too many legendary items in the game, and B, they felt like it was maybe a little overpowered. But if the latter was the case, I doubt they would have let Oxtane even keep the damn thing, considering that would have put him at a considerable advantage against other players, especially in the raiding scene. So it's most likely that Blizzard removed this item because they just didn't want to implement their multiple legendary system. Of course, the most famous of these legendary items hidden in the game's code that were never released is the legendary blade known as Ashbringer. Pretty early into WoW's existence, data miners found the model and the description for Ashbringer itself within the game files of World of Warcraft. This, of course, led to massive speculation that the blade was actually in the game. It was just hidden, or at least very cryptic. If you want to see the specifics about Ashbringer, go ahead and watch Haven Games' video on the history of the Ashbringer. It's super interesting, and he can explain it a lot better than I can, so go check out his video on it, and that will also be in the description below. Basically, the gist of Ashbringer is that numerous NPCs would hint at the fact that Ashbringer might be obtainable once Blackwing Lair hit. And of course, once Blackwing Lair did hit, nothing really happened. Ashbringer was still unobtainable, and it just perplexed players even more why those hints even existed in-game. Of course, it began even more speculation when an item dropped in Dire Maul, which was a thoroughly read copy of Nat Pagel's Extreme Anglin. It was a tome that was readable, and it had every page ripped out but the last. And the one page said, "And so that's where you'll find the legendary sword of the Scarlet High Lord, Ashbringer. Ain't it amazing what you run into in an ordinary day of fishing?" It goes without saying that this was a huge troll by Blizzard, but that didn't stop players from trying to fish up the Ashbringer and asking Nat Pagel himself, the NPC, where to find it. Of course, he ended up saying nothing, but it is pretty funny to think that players went around Azeroth trying to fish up a legendary sword. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a ton of fun learning more of these facts about WoW. Some of these I already knew, and I'm sure some of these all of you knew as well. But it is interesting to revisit them, and some of them I had no idea about, like Talisman of Binding Shard. I had no idea that even existed and happened, so it's pretty awesome to do some research and just find out some of the cool history about WoW. So obviously this video was more about the evolution of WoW from where it started to when retail vanilla launched up until the early days of WoW when things were a bit wonky. But I do plan to have a follow-up to this video, which will consist of more WoW secrets and just interesting facts that I managed to get my hands on, not just from vanilla WoW, but things that even go into WoW today, mysteries about the game, and other things like that that I find interesting. Also feel free to chip in any extra information you can on things that I talked about in this video, or what I could talk about in the next video, things that you maybe want to see, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see the follow-up video. Like this video if you liked it. Until next time, my name is Oxtane, and I'll see you guys later.